My name's Bill Lois, and we're in a place of, in my view, tranquility. The water behind me is water that's travelled on a long journey from the catchment of the mighty Burdekin River, which takes up approximately a third of Queensland on the western side of the Great Dividing Range. And that water's travelled from those catchment areas through a number of processes, also within the river system, the mighty Burdekin River, through the Burdekin Falls Dam, the Clare Weir, and down into the lower delta. We're in the bottom end of the South Burdekin Water Board area. Management really consists of water table management, the processes that are used. And this water here is water that has been consistently used for irrigation or for other activities. In the case of the South Burdekin Water Board, it pumps the water from the river, it puts it through diversion channels, it uses that water in recharge pits which go into the underground aquifer for the farmers to actually relift and use for their irrigation. And that irrigation process is continual throughout the aquifer system, where it's recycled from the aquifer to the surface, the excess goes back down, it's reused by another farmer, and continues on its way throughout this defined water area. The water area is against the sea, and just behind me, about 100 metres, is the start of Saltwater Creek, which is the end of the journey for this water, where it actually enters another environment and has other uses, apart from the hydrological cycle where water evaporates or transpires, turns into rain, back into the catchment and back to where we are through its long journey. We're very satisfied with this water here. This is a pristine area, it's very much untouched by man. We've got most of our natural trees here. This waterway has been slightly improved with crossings, access points, but the actual journey of water from here trickles down into our seawater channels, our creeks. The quality of the water, of course, is represented by the trees that are here. The little fish, the smaller juvenile fish that are in these creeks behind me, which make this place their home before they actually grow much larger and then return to the sea. This area is also a floodway. Once we have extensive rain in the catchment, especially our floodplain catchment of the South Burdekin Water Area, this is one of the main floodways that takes that excess water out to sea. The lagoon behind me is reminiscent of many of the natural lagoons with water lilies and very clean water, because that water's been through a filtering process on its way. We're here in the middle of the year, it's almost what we call our winter, so there's a limited amount of water, and by the end of this year that water will diminish because of the dry times we're experiencing. But again, once we have rain, it'll rejuvenate the whole area, and flood levels can be seen along tree lines where they carry debris, and of course that's what keeps the area alive. The trees are the natural pumps in this area, especially the tea trees and a lot of the other natives. Because they're not disturbed, they carry on with their own natural process. The water itself has probably been through many of filtering of the aquifer, the filtering of the vegetation within our lagoons, and it is the lifeblood of our district, and it is our liquid gold here because of the need of water and the need of water for irrigated agriculture and the sustainability of our community. Very good example of a self-help community-based scheme. Our future, we believe that commercialisation of water is going to impact fairly strongly on the activities of the South Burdekin Water Board. The community knows only too well the value of water, of that liquid gold, and although they don't place a monetary value on it, they place a value on it for the community and for the activities that generate good, healthy and sustainable communities. The well-being of a community is expressed by its water, especially in agricultural areas, and the way that water is developed and utilised is the end result of a good community. One of those concerns is the commercialisation that will take water to other places and reduce the natural processes that these areas rely mostly on. The South Burdekin Water Board has mimicked natural processes in artificial recharge and water table management, and they've been over the last 40 years very successful in that pursuit. In the future, we need to look at different ways of utilising the water that's available, even though our river water may have changed in its quality in the sense that there's more suspended solids or turbidity levels are higher. We need to utilise that water in different ways that we can still mimic the natural processes and keep the balance. The future is really in our hands, and the innovation that we can put to good use to carry on the good job. I think that that can be achievable. I've had some time with the Water Board and experienced the successes of the Water Board, the expansion of the industry that has been here, and we are still a premier irrigation area. There's no doubt that we've got the climate, the sunshine, the water and the good soils, and we are very conscious of what we've got and how we should maintain that. The methods that we would use or utilise is definitely not beyond our vision, and many of these water areas, which are similar to the ones behind me, are in the top end of our system where we can actually provide more intrusion value, good clean water, or even with sediment load type water where we can actually filter that water through a natural sand filter and get it back into the underground. So I believe there's still a great future here for us. We need to keep a common sense about it and a practicality about it and minimise that cost that always seems to be one of the bugbears of irrigation schemes around Australia, if not the world. Our populations are growing, and we believe we're in one of the better parts of the world, and there's no doubt that people will be attracted to this area, not only for irrigated agriculture, but for what the area and the benefits of the area have to offer. And even if our population does grow to a point where we branch out into other types of activities other than irrigated agriculture, we believe we'll be prepared for that in the future.
I'm Bruno Kamer. I've been farming in this district for 60 years. I've been involved with sugar cane only, and back in the early days, when I first came into the industry, we were producing somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 tonne of cane. Then as time went on, it became pretty obvious in about the mid-60s that we weren't going to have sufficient water to keep expanding. We were hoping then to expand to 500,000. We were told that we didn't have the water. So a group of grower representatives came up with the idea of taking free flow water from the Burdekin River and using it to recharge our underground. This idea was put to the growers and it was received quite well, so the leaders then approached the then sugar miller. Well, the millers agreed that they would fund it in a ratio of 2/3, 1/3, which was what we based the division of sugar monies on. We proceeded to form channels. We used natural waterways, and we formed intrusion areas in appropriate places, which were merely holes in the ground down to the sands of the aquifer, and we would pump clean water into there, and it found its way into the aquifer. In '66 we pumped our first water, and then about 68, 69, 70 were very dry years, and without that bit of assistance, instead of expanding our production, we were pretty sure it would have retracted. In the early 80s, we exceeded 1 million tonnes of cane production. Then came the advent of the Burdekin Dam. Fortunately enough, since 1988 it first filled, it hasn't failed 1 year to fill to spill point. Now this allowed us to pump for longer periods, which was great. But at the same time, it probably diminished the amount of clean water that we had from the river. Now since we couldn't pump dirty water, and when we say dirty water we mean silt-laden water, into our aquifers and intrusion pits for fear of clogging up the sand, we then shifted our policy slightly and allowed more surface pumping from channels. We put a surcharge on that, but it was readily accepted by growers. The fact that the millers and the growers got together and done this with their own funding, probably the first time that millers and growers have entered jointly into such a venture, and that venture of course proved very successful. I must end up by saying that considering the fact that we have in 40 years almost quadrupled our production, when at the original time of establishing the board we were doubtful of reaching 500,000 tonnes. The fact that the board is still operating on the same basis, still self-funded, self-managed, emphasises pretty strongly that the establishment, operation and management of the South Burdekin Water Board has been one of the truly successful stories of this district.
Well, my name is Pat Toohey. I became a member of the staff of this water board very late in 1977. The fact that pumping, as far as the board was concerned, particularly with regard to recharge, was conditioned by the fact it was free flow. We had access to free flow at all times. It was not water of turbidity level that sanctioned pit recharge, the system that the board developed prior to my becoming involved. And from that stemmed high turbidity pumping. Now, what did we do with the high turbidity water? If we put it into the pits, of course, we clogged our pits. Clogging the pits, and at the time that I came here we had 35 of them, meant extensive cleaning, and that was becoming costly, because not only was it costly in terms of cleaning, it was very costly in terms of importing sand from the Burdekin River to reline those pits, because we were getting to an unworkable depth, even though we had some excellent machines for cleaning, particularly, of course, the track-equipped excavator. So the board, in its wisdom, then after discussing the situation fairly closely, got away from the fact that the board originally was set up for groundwater recharge, that is, to replenish the groundwater contained in the aquifers that was pumped out by the farmers for irrigation. The decision being that the high turbidity period of flow in the river, we would continue pumping, but we would not release that water into pits, but would make it available to the farmers for a free pumping source. And this, of course, had a dual advantage. They were able to utilise the water that we were pumping, and as a number of farmers said, that high turbidity water saves us quite a considerable amount of money in terms of fertiliser, because the turbidity settles out and we're not buying fertiliser, we're getting good river silt that in effect becomes a top dressing. The spin-off from that lay in the fact that by the farmers being allowed to open water access and pumping from the channel system, they then left the groundwater alone, and so they were not creating any particular drawdown. Now, this was of a major advantage to us, particularly in the seaboard profiles, where a buffer of fresh water had to be maintained against the seaboard to offset saltwater profile intrusions. And this was successful to the extent, and there was a herringbone effect out in the Shire area of intruded salts that was shrunk back in its plan area and also bulldozed towards the seaboard profiles. So all of this stemmed from the fact that the farmer wasn't pumping from the underground and had access to the turbid water that was being pumped into the channels. This tended to fluff up and loosen the soil, and therefore they were able to obtain penetration of the irrigation waters. And the aim was either Urana Dam or Hell's Gate, both of which, of course, were headwater dams. With some degree of timidity, I approached one of the senior members of the committee and suggested to him that if they were going to go ahead with some form of pondage in the Burdekin River system, they would need to look at two things. One, a far larger dam than the ones that they had in mind in the headwaters, and B, they would have to involve a lot more people. And by a lot more people, I was indicating that they would need to consult with the local authorities from Bowen to Townsville and inland to Charters Towers and Dalrymple, but also they would have to make contact with the various industrial consortiums within the area that I profiled to them so that they could obtain support and I was one that was fortunate enough to be there during the completion of the dam and its official opening. And I think it's history now that Bob Hawke realised what was going to be the end result and benefit of the construction of the dam at the site. And the federal government put up $141 million with the infrastructure responsibility being placed in the hands of the state. And the infrastructure is still being developed and largely directioned by what is now, in my time, was irrigation and water, then it became Queensland Water Resources, then it became DPI, and now I think it's Sunwater. It was breaking new ground completely, the concept of recharge, of course. Now bear in mind the fact that 37 pits were functioning and they were brought into line by my predecessor, who was Tom Musgrave. Tom implemented the activity of the selection of sites for pits. These, of course, were by and large subject to the whim and regard of the local farmer, who was very, very reluctant to make any land available for anything other than production of cane. But once it was realised that these pits were an achievable situation, and I would highlight here, the Aya pits, 2 kilometres away, was a farmer by the name of Delaney. Now, when we opened the 4 Aya pits for recharge, this chappie Delaney could phone the office and say, Pat, you must have cracked the Aya pits on the day before yesterday. My well has risen 6 inches overnight. So it's a fair indication that the transfer of water underground, the hydraulic profiles of the underground is such that it will achieve the flow of water from these recharge pits. It's certainly been a credit to the board over the years that it has been in function. The releases from the dam flowed downstream, and the intermediate pondage at Clare Weir had a tendency to tidy up the water to a point whereby recharge did become acceptable in terms of turbidity. The greatest advantage of the dam, of course, was regulated flow. At Warren's Gully was double-stage Bethunes driven by 250 horsepower motors, and the inlet system was a 48-inch underground pipe with a grill system screening out river debris and that sort of thing, and the whole station, of course, was submersible with a pressurised bells over each of the 2 pumping units up the top that in effect became a siltation chamber because we had quite a length of 48-inch pipeline. I think what was in that about 4 or 5 kilometres, that we had to arrest the infiltration of sand into that particular area, because to clean it out of that pipeline would have represented a tremendous problem to us and involved tremendous man hours. So it was a lot easier to develop a siltation trap with an open top that we could just back an excavator up to it and clean the rubbish out of it. Relift stations, that is relift station to lift the water out of the Burdekin River into a channel system, and the development of pits. And the recharge pit is very, very simple because the alluvials are not terribly deep here in the Burdekin, and access to clean aquifers is quite simple in that most places clean aquifers can be achieved by 1.5 to no more than 2 metres in depth, and there you have exposed the old deltaic formation of the Burdekin River, and the porosity of that varies from very, very coarse to very, very fine. But by pumping water into those pits that were so developed, they could be whatever length the farmer in those days were prepared to make available.
It's a little beach.
Yep.
You had about a 12-foot scaly living there for a while. Our bloke used to come up and, you know, got trash screens down here, you get weed and stuff on them, and he came down one morning and the crocodile was laying there, so he got a bit of a fright. We had to calm him down when he got back in the morning. So they're always here. You never see them until it's a cool morning or something. They get out on the bank and get into the sun. You can see the slight formation of that sand going around there, and down further there's a rocky overflow point. So we've got a natural damming effect here now. So all it does is elevates the water in this pond for our pump to have a good flow through and not starve for water. We pump it out and put it into our channel system, and that channel system goes around the edge of the southern boundary of our area. This water goes up over the bank into Warren's Gully Channel and travels right through our whole system on the southern boundary, and it services a lot of recharge pits. The base of the pit, as you can see, is clean river sand. It will need to be cleaned. This vegetation that's sparsely spread over the bottom needs to be removed, and once water enters here, it percolates down through the sand and directly into the underground. This pit's located very close to town. It's one of the 40 or so pits and recharge intrusion areas that we've got. Town water supply is taken from groundwater, and this pit, along with others, has the effect of replenishing that water for town water use. This outlet is one of a variation of outlets that we use, but the idea of an outlet structure as we've got here, which breaks down over the rock beneath it, is to try and aerate the water, get a bit of oxygen into the water and allow it to settle once it gets into the pit. As the water comes in, it bubbles up or mushrooms out over the top of the cylinder. It falls down over the cylinder, over the concrete and onto the rocks, which eliminates erosion in such an erosion-prone soil condition and maintains our spillway into the pit. The basement rock within our aquifer, our delta, slopes away from where this channel goes, so this is a channel that provides very good intrusion value for our activities for the delta. Keeps the aquifer topped up. Also provides a barrier between rainfall that mobilises soil salts and the fresh water in the aquifer, so we tend to keep that line fairly full so that it keeps that mobilised rainfall runoff out of the area from the surrounding grazing properties and natural salts that come out of the soils. It's a total management system. It's not just surface irrigation. It's about maintaining the water table, maintaining the aquifer, and also supplying that surface water to conjunctively use with other water. So the cane farmer gets a really good mix of water that suits his application. Any other crops likewise, they got good quality water. The river water with its turbidity also helps some farmers where they're in very sandy soils to actually seal the soils up a bit with flood irrigation so that the flood irrigation doesn't seep or percolate through the underlying sands. That allows the water to run through their furrows and irrigate their crops. So the silt in the water does help them. Doesn't help us with our recharge activities, but there's a good compromise there. We maintain a fairly good intake percentage over a year that actually goes through our channel beds and banks and helps the aquifer. We've got off-takes, farmers taking water, but some of that channel goes through very sandy soil, so the actual intrusion values of those channels are kept alive by the excavator with the rake on it. The rake actually takes out any vegetation, but it also disturbs the sediment that's deposited in the bottom of the channel. And those channels are built through sandy strata, so they actually take a lot of water, which goes down into the aquifer.
Hi, my name's Laurie Regano. I started in the sugar industry in late 1969. I started on Dad's farm, which is a riverbank farm on Powers Road. I joined the board in 1990. I enjoyed my time on the board. I learned a lot of things about water. I learned a lot of things about replenishment of what the board does. And actually, when you think back of the people who really instigated this whole project back in 1966, that had the foresight to see that we needed to help ourselves if we were to have a sustainable sugar industry in this district. With the good work of the board, also the good work of the staff. And in the time that I was there, I must comment on the board that I was with and also the staff that I worked with. I worked with Bill Lois, who I think was a fantastic manager of the board. But at the end of the day, it was up to the staff to implement that policy. And I believed in the time that I was there, they'd done an excellent job. I always seen the staff as good friends, not only as workers of the board, but we all, as a whole team, played a major role in what the board did. Well, I was chairman for a 6-year period, and we went through water reforms, and water reform was a big thing in them days. We went through a lot of changes, and one of the changes the board went through was the loss of the production levy. In them days, we were able to put a levy on production, and everyone paid on the amount of cane that went through the mill, and they paid so many cents per tonne to the board. It was then deemed to be an excise and it had to be abolished. The two boards, the North and South Burdekin Water Board, at the time, we really weren't happy in losing that levy, and we had to try to get something else in place. So with the managers and the two chairmen and with the help of the board, we went to Brisbane to try to do something that would have tried to hold the production levy. I think we put out an excellent case, but at the end of the day, it was going to be hard to maintain. We were lucky in them days that probably through the work that we did through the board and that we were lucky to hold through the Water Act an area-based charge, which today is still in place. And actually everyone's accepted and it seems to work well. The board had an allocation that was basically negotiated with the department, and from there the board sort of continued on its work. But we sort of, Bill and I sat down with the board there one day and we sort of said, gee, have we got enough allocation? So we did decide an additional 5,000 megalitres of water at one stage. So with that we bought the 5,000 and then we increased that by another 10,000. So we bought a total of 15,000 megalitres additional to the actual allocation that the board has today. What that does is, to me, is an insurance to the board, to what we do, to the replenishment of the board. And also it does, I suppose, in years when, you know, the water is not going to be in the dam, there's always going to be that little bit extra, does come in handy. The board has in its time, I believe, helped the whole community. It's not only been the industry that's here, but the whole Burdekin community, whether it's a cane farmer or whether it's a veggie grower or whether it's the townspeople. The millers and the growers, CSR and cane growers, have really got together to keep this board alive, because at the end of the day it's the water that we can put in the underground through replenishment and through our surface water application that produces the crops that are needed in this district. And of course, if it wasn't for this board, the crops that are there now and the community benefits that are here now would not be here. It's a self-help scheme, it's unique, but I believe we've got the biggest natural aquifer in Australia. Where will it leave the board in the future will be interesting, but I think the board has got the runs on the board to show that it can do things properly, and if it needs to change, it will change. But I also believe that with anything that you do today, I think you prove change, you never force change.
Just here to show you what we've diversified and what we're doing here on my farm. We're growing different horticultural crops, cucumbers, I've got some chilies over there, pumpkins, all grown on plastic and trickle irrigation. It seems to be the way to go. We've got plenty of water here in the Burdekin, but it's good for the growing with trickle is very efficient. So with our vine crops, we get good results. We can fertilise via the trickle. Quite manageable because you've taken away all the physical labour of weeding. Just to make sure that we keep our irrigation tape clean of any grime and stuff, so the waters forever won't get blocked up. The outlets, the emitters won't be blocked. So we've got a filter system, just tap straight into the delivery pipe, through the filter, into the blue hose, sunny hose, and out to the blocks of vegetables I've got growing. This is one of the main lines I've got coming out off my irrigation pump, and then once it gets to the field, to the block where you want to grow, we've just got certain take-off points. You just make a hole, put your fitting in, hook your tape up. The tape travels underneath the plastic all the way down to the end, tie it off, and that's it. The reason for the plant to the one side is when you've got machines that go through and punch your holes and and get your plastic in preparation for planting, you wouldn't like to puncture your tape. The implement lays your plastic, lays your tape, covers the dirt up on the sides, and leaves you the field prepared as you see it. It's just a soft plastic tape underneath the grounds with the emitters dripping out the water through every certain amount of distance. So that's what it's all about. That's all it takes to water our crops underneath the ground. All these young fruits, as they're growing and the plant develops, by being able to fertilise it, you're fertilising each fruit, each flower that comes on and fruits. It's getting the same nutrients as what the earlier plant would have had with the pre-fertilisers, everything under the ground. So you're just continually fertilising, and these younger fruits will develop to something like this, we hope. Also some hot chilies. You can see the small chilies growing in here maybe, just starting to come online. Just one of the many crops in the area that you can grow because of the conditions we have here. Plenty of sunshine, nice warm winters, and plenty of water. With the different crops, because of the multiculturalism that we have here in Australia now, we've got plenty of Asians, Europeans have come to our shores, taught us how to eat all these crops. So we've got the water, we've got the land, the sunshine to grow these crops for them.
My name is Chris Canavan. We have been farming in this location, my family, since 1914, and we're sugarcane farmers for all that time. See, my great-grandfather started farming in this area, and my father was a founding member of the local water board area. He was a member of the South Burdekin Water Board for 25 years, just short of. We're having mixed success with our other crops, mainly due to learning as we go along. There's nothing wrong with the Burdekin climate and the abundance of water here. These crops love growing in the place. It's just that we've got to learn the right way to do it. The other crops, it's returns us more per hectare. Not really a single crop aspect, but because of these crops and because of the climate we live in, we can double crop, which we can't do with cane. With cane ties up your area for 4 or 5 years. With these other crops, as the one behind me, navy beans, it's only 3.5 months. And when we take that out, we can put corn in. And when we take that out, we can put soybean in over Christmas. So the margin, the gross margin that we can expect if we do it right would probably be 3 times as amount of cane. But as I said before, you can't just go into other crops and think a single crop will get you out of trouble. You've got a double crop. We've got peanuts over on the river. We've got Atsuki beans. We've got sorghum for the seed companies to my left. Resources and the infrastructure that is involved in sugarcane has got to be commended. The way the mills run the transport system, the way the harvesters harvest the cane, the way the whole system works from the time the match goes in to the time the season finished is nothing short of spectacular. It is a very well-oiled machine. The problems with these other diverse crops is that we haven't got the infrastructure to back them up. Now, my view is that the whole area should be overseen by a company that runs all aspects of the farming sector in this area. Doesn't matter what the crops are, and to try and get the whole process of growing crops and processing them and marketing them as well oiled as the sugar side of the industry is. It's no use going into these other crops unless your margins are attractive enough. And to let that fall back into the hands of individuals is a bit of a hard ask for people to take that risk. But have we got any choice other than to set up some sort of a marketing arm or some sort of a body that investigates all avenues of return for our ground here?
Hey, I'm Charlie Tamer. I've been a cane farmer here in the Burdekin region for a number of years, since the mid-60s. And in recent years we've decided to make a change over to horticulture. And we grow about 4,000 mango trees in this region, and egg fruit is our other main horticultural crop that we grow. Everything is under trickle irrigation. Our mango trees have under tree micro sprinklers, and we felt that we had to make the change as the sugar industry was going through some tough times. We have very minimal wastage, very little water lost to evaporation, and we try and get all the water targeted onto the roots, and of course with the nutrients as well. So we have very little leaching, very little water wastage. We have a system of moisture monitoring equipment whereby we can monitor moisture levels at varying depths through the soil profile, and that gives us a little bit of information on how and when to irrigate, how much to irrigate. We have employed this technology over the last few years. Whilst it's expensive, it certainly is a great way to cut irrigation costs, because our water usage has actually been cut dramatically since installing this equipment. We know exactly when to water, and every day is a different day according to depending on, I suppose, the conditions, the weather conditions, and how the crops are producing on a given day, and we water accordingly. And of course our water usage compared to sugar cane is only a fraction, megalitre usage per hectare. All our water is groundwater. We pump it from underground aquifer. That's one of the things I suppose the Burdekin region is well known for. We have a system here where we're virtually floating on water. Of course, thanks to organisations like the South Burdekin Water Board that keep topping up and keep replenishing that underground from water out of the Burdekin River. That maintains our water levels, and it minimises salt intrusion, and it seems to work very well. I suppose without the assistance of organisations like the South Burdekin Water Board, we would be struggling, especially in an area like we are here on the southern side of Home Hill. It's always been known that it's one of the driest areas in years gone by. The big advantage with sandy soil, the trickle tape, you don't have that water loss as we did with flood irrigating. We can get even cropping now, whereas years ago under sugarcane, where you had different soils and soil profiles across a given paddock, cost by about 30%. More product per hectare, and a reduction of 30% in water consumption. And of course we've actually minimised fertiliser leakage down into the underground aquifer, because we are targeting the roots. The horticultural industry would have to be one of the most water conscious industries around. There's another area we're looking at the moment is in forestry plantations. We've done a lot of work in that field. The Burdekin region is ideally suited to growing forestry plantations. It's been proven with mangoes. Mango trees grow well in the Burdekin. It's one of the largest mango producing regions in Australia. African mahogany specifically is also another great way for people to bring into production some of their marginal land that in the past has been unproductive with crops such as sugarcane. Good for the environment, and they certainly keep the salinity problems minimal. This is one of the tree crops we've diversified into, African mahogany trees. Certainly very well suited to the Burdekin region. They grow extremely well, very vigorous. As you can see, this particular stand of trees here, only about 5 months old, and they are already around 2 metres in height. It thrives on saline conditions as well. Of course, it is a long-term investment, a 15-20 year project. The way things are looking around the world with regards to timber production, and the fact that a lot of native forests have been stripped, plantation forestry seems to be the way to go, and there certainly is a lot of backing there from state and federal governments. High class timber that will fetch a very good price on the market, especially in years to come. These particular trees here will need some sort of intense management for the first 4 or 5 years of their lives, but they only require around 4 litres of water per tree per day. They do a fantastic job in tapping into the aquifer. After about 4 or 5 years, these trees will become virtually self-sufficient.
We do have a pristine environment off our coast, and this particular aquifer extends to the coast against the sea. We're very conscious of the water quality that enters the Great Barrier Reef lagoon and the World Heritage value of that reef and the surrounds that we do have. We are taking every effort to achieve the goals that are set to maintain the water quality standard that people would like to see. We do have to weigh that against the activities that are being performed on the land and how we can address those with practical common sense solutions. So the future still looks good, and apart from everything else, with the current drought, which does seem to have a lot of people concerned, and failed wet seasons, we are still very positive about our future in the water industry.